Okay, so feedback is one of the unavoidable encounters, and when it comes to giving feedback, we love to give the feedback, and when it comes to receiving feedback, we always try to resist the feedback, and there are a number of reasons for it. Because many times when we try to receive the feedback, we look at the person who is giving the feedback, we try to see that there is difference between what he preaches and what he practices. You are giving me feedback, but do you really follow what you say? Yeah? So walk the talk is very important. I have seen people, seasoned professionals, experienced people, they also falter and fail when it comes to giving the feedback because they are not in sync with the generations and the lifestyles. You may be from X generation and now you are dealing with Generation Z. Their lifestyle, their thought process is totally different. Are you aware what are their red flags? Are you aware what are their triggers? Are you aware what are their hot buttons? And one of the biggest blunder in giving feedback is you don't get into the root cause of the problem of that particular person's performance. You just listen to someone else, maybe your psychophants or maybe could be XYZ, because they have to give you some news update. या उनकी आदत है आपके कान भरने की. अगर आपके कान कच्चे हैं तो आप कभी सही फीडबैक उस परफॉर्मर को दे ही नहीं पाओगे. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the feedback should be very, very rejuvenating so that people will get so inspired they are able to resurrect, recharge and rise again. That's what the resilience. Feedback should enable the resilience, enable, empower people to achieve the impossible. Feedback is champion's breakfast. That's what 𝗀𝗃𝗿𝗀𝗃𝗿𝗃 says. So ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, with very fresh perspective, let's take a deep dive when it comes to feedback mechanism, though in a very succinct way. Let's paint this picture of feedback with different unique colors on the canvas of professional enhancement skills. As you know, I love to make an acronym so that it gets etched in your heart and we can recall anytime. It's very easy to remember, period. So feedback, in that feedback, if I may talk about feed, F-E-E-D, and for me that F stands for freedom. Freedom, a mental state of absolute freedom when people feel free to receive and give feedback. That's basically a state of fearlessness. This F is possible when we get into the E, the immediate E, that's basically empathy, and honest empathy. When we have this utter degree, when we showcase this utter degree of empathy towards each other, then people tend to become free to talk. They are free to listen to you. That empathy. And that E and D is basically excellence dose, because it's basically an ego which becomes the biggest barrier in receiving and giving feedback. Isn't it so? Ego. So an ego, as we know, usually it takes us towards negative zone. We get into catastrophizing, sometimes people suffer through imposter syndrome, and then we are thrown into an abyss of self-sabotage. There is no end to it. We become cynical. So very, very commonly practiced framework. In that ambit, we are going to look into the feedback. It's basically why, when, what, where, and how. Yeah. So why feedback? Definitely to strengthen the relations at work, win-win association, to streamline the operations flawlessly, and we are able to deliver the impeccable products and the services. We need to figure out, surface out the bottlenecks, be it spearheading a new project or it can be ongoing business development. It can day-to-day encounters, not just during the PMS, performance management system or the appraisals, but it is often, it's a part of review, because I believe in role when it comes to the 3 R's, the role, the report, and the review. So it's a part of your review mechanism. So why the feedback? Definitely in pursuit of excellence, so that we are able to achieve the organizational and the departmental goals in time without causing any kind of mishaps or accidents, and to achieve the goals in most sophisticated, efficient and effective way. As simple as that. When? Definitely the post-event, the post-mission, because we all are inquisitive to do the post-mortem, what went right, what went wrong, and people are in very receptive mode. So that is the time when the iron is hot, you are supposed to hammer. That's basically when. And when it comes to what, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, what has to be very, very specific, based on the facts and the figures. One should refrain from opinions and prejudices and biases, or maybe the inputs given by your people which you are not cross-checked, double-checked, cross-verified. No, सुनी सुनाई बातों पे नहीं जाना है. You need to actually get into the root cause, actually what has caused that particular thing about that person or that process or that phenomena. So you have to be very, very scientific. So feedback mechanism is like both art and science. Where to give the feedback? At what place? Where? Definitely everybody is aware of that. And when one has to appreciate someone, we have to appreciate publicly, yeah? But when it comes to giving the feedback, though constructive feedback, though constructive criticism, it has to be given in private. So we have to maintain the absolute privacy of the person. So only you and that person has to be there, so that you can give the feedback. That's basically where. Then how? The most crucial and critical part of feedback mechanism is how. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, there is no concrete how, but you need to pull up your emotional intelligence, anything and everything which comes into your emotional intelligence. To start with, great degree of empathy, yeah, and then you yourself have to be a great listener, because you may not be aware of the perspective what the recipient is going through. Enable the person to completely open up. It's kind of catharsis. You can allow him to speak out louder what he feels. To make the environment very, very conducive and very, very comfortable. Most of us resist the feedback, right? Why? Because we know the reasons. We see that people, what they preach, they don't practice. But let me tell you, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, if you are getting a feedback and if you feel, let me tell you my personal practice when it comes to receiving feedback. Even a child who gives me a feedback, I accept with great, great gratitude. And even when someone who doesn't like me, or maybe my so-called enemy or a hater who gives me a feedback out of jealousy and tries to mislead me, to feel me belittled, even in that case, I very smilingly and thankfully receive the feedback. And if I feel little uncomfortable, little disturbed, little agitated, it means something is wrong within me, else why I'm feeling disturbed. That's a lesson for me that I need to work on my ego. Maybe my ego is getting flared up, else I should not feel uncomfortable, period. So it's very wisely said, it persists what you resist. I take it this way. Existence is trying to teach you a lesson, and it will keep on manifesting, it will keep on repeating unless you don't learn from that lesson. It may come through somebody which is giving you feedback, so you need to be really grateful. संत कबीर ने कहा है कि अपने निंदक को आप हमेशा अपने पास रखो, because he is not a person who is very goody-goody and he will keep on misleading you by his good talks, sweet talks. In fact, you need to get surrounded with people who can tell you your flaws without fear and favor, though with great degree of politeness. Yeah. So one should be very grateful to the feedback. World's greatest athletes, sports warriors, champions, any kind of champion you see, they always look for feedback. And ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, when it comes to giving feedback, it would be the best if you ask me out of my practice. And my better half, Dr. Kranti, just told me that, if you can ask that recipient when would be the appropriate time and the place, you let me know so that we can discuss on the areas of improvement. It's a kind of, feedback which I would like to give it to you, solicited feedback. There is one more technique which you need to keep in mind when it comes to giving feedback or receiving feedback. That's basically halt. H-A-L-T, halt, because it may really halt the feedback mechanism, and the purpose gets defeated. But halt is expanded into when you are hungry, when you are angry, when you are lonely, and when you are tired. I mean mentally and physically tired. During such time, You are not supposed to give the feedback, and you are not even supposed to receive the feedback. So you can delay the feedback mechanism. So you can delay the feedback process. As many as professional, as many as techniques, and people practice. I remember I used to widely practice something called sandwich approach, but it's debatable because sandwich approach, most of us are aware, is basically starting the discussion with on positive note, and then in between whatever the feedback, ruthless feedback you want to give, and then ending with and ending again with positive note. But many times people get confused कि भई ये, and they say कहना क्या चाहते हो? To be very conscious about the message which you need to drive down. Another technique is SBI. For example, you pinpoint the situation and then the behavior in that situation and the impact or the implication of that particular behavior. For example, you are having a review meet and you as a boss and one of your team players is giving you good inputs, but you are blocking, you are not listening to that. So your behavior is not encouraging. So what impact it gives to the meeting? The people may think that you are not a listener, you are not welcoming the ideas of the team. You are like one-way communicator and you are an autocratic kind of a leader. And another technique is STAR. That's basically you highlight on the situation, the task is involved in it, the action you are supposed to take, maybe the corrective action so that you don't repeat the mistakes. Yeah, and then R is definitely the desired result. What we repeatedly do, then excellence is not an act, but it's a habit. Aristotle has very aptly put across, and I completely in congruence to it what he said, and I subscribe very consciously to this eternal practice. So be it professional enhancement or could be personal development. Individual development plan is always a subset of your departmental or organizational development, isn't it, Sean? अगर मैं कहूँ तो फीडबैक कह लो, तो फीडबैक कह लो या क्रिटिसिज्म कह लो, कंस्ट्रक्टिव क्रिटिसिज्म कह लो, तो आलोचना करो आप, लेकिन आरोप मत लगाओ। आरोप लगाना और आलोचना करना दो अलग बातें हैं। Be it giving feedback or receiving feedback, the common denominator is basically not to misunderstand anyone and not to get misunderstood by anyone.